Okay, it's 4:30 Central European time here in Amsterdam. So welcome to the first episode of Think Travel Payments. My name is Paul van Alphen. I'm a consultant at Up in the Air, and I have the pleasure of welcoming two guests today for this first episode. Welcome Suby and welcome Maarten. Maybe a short introduction from your side, Suby.
Okay, so we go ahead.
Thanks, thanks, Paul, for the introduction. I'm Suby Valluri, and I started my career as a software engineer, programming banking applications. After that, I moved to travel industry in various roles. I worked as a project and product manager, and I'm very interested to implement innovative products. That's about me.
And you'll do an introduction to Finom, our
Sure.
culture in a bit. So yeah, Maarten, over to you.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Maarten Rooijers. I am based in the Netherlands, not far from Amsterdam. I currently have my own payment consultancy company called Payment Taking Off, focusing on payments, especially for the travel and airline industry. Most people will probably know me from my background at KLM, where I used to work a little over 30 years. And in my last position, which I hold for 15 years, I was the Director Customer Payments and was with my team responsible for the payment proposition of Air France and KLM in slightly more than 75 countries.
Thank you, Maarten. And I think it's fair to say that we're long-time industry peers and have worked in this space for a long time together. So again, welcome. A bit of background on this series of webinars. The idea comes from the need for sharing information, for creating awareness about this complex topic. And Suby was so kind to approach me and to come up with the idea of a joint exercise and organizing this series of webinars and have Finom sponsoring it. Original idea was, by the way, to do a podcast, but if you know me, I talk in pictures, so that doesn't work with a podcast. So we decided in the end to do a series of webinars. It's all about education. It's about awareness. It's about creating a wider community of industry specialists that can help, the growth that we'll see in the next couple of years and to support that. Please know this is an independent platform, so we'll have speakers from around the industry joining me for the sessions that are coming up. We have for now planned 8 episodes in this first season. Well, hopefully we'll have more than one season. And we start off with an introduction to airline travel payments, just to set the scene, the framework, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then over the next months, and the idea is to do it on a monthly basis, and everyone who has subscribed to this particular episode will also get an invite for the next one. But hopefully in about 4 weeks from now, we'll organize number 2. And over the rest of the year, we'll try to cover all the relevant topics and any other topics that come up during the course of the year, any news items, any areas where I think it's interesting for the wider community to learn from. For today's session, we decided to do first an introduction, and there's a lot to cover. We have 45 minutes, by the way, so not that much time is seen looking at the agenda. We'll start with an overview. We'll start to zoom in on a bit on the travel landscape. What are the different payment characteristics? We'll then look at the consumer payment trends, look at how payments have evolved over the years. We'll zoom in on payment orchestration, and we'll also touch on some of the latest news items and fintech trends at the end. So hopefully you're ready. Let's get started.
Paul, prior to moving on, maybe you want to do some household regarding questions and answers and things like that.
And it was your task to remind me of that, Maarten. Thank you so much. Yeah, very good point. Thank you again. So housekeeping is very simple. We don't have any emergency exits, so that's good. Toilets also, where to find them in your own place. But it's mainly about the Q&A. So it's Zoom. You probably have used it before. There is a Q&A box in the Zoom application. We will monitor the questions, and where it makes sense, we'll pick them up during the session, and otherwise we'll do a final round at the end to see if we have any remaining questions that have been left unanswered. Any other housekeeping, Maarten? Or
not for now. No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Having covered the housekeeping, so over to our sponsor, Finom, Suby. Maybe a bit of background on the company. It's a new company, right?
Sure. So Finom is a payment orchestration platform designed specifically for travel merchants. The background of the company is basically we started this project in the innovation lab of Hanair, and then we make a new entity to have a travel fintech. So as a payment orchestration platform, we try to solve 3 problems. One is to increase your acceptance rate and decrease the payment risk and decrease the payment transaction cost. So basically, these 3 aims we try to solve. And next question is how we do it. One aspect is to build connections with the PSPs and alternative payment methods directly so that you don't need to build it yourself, so you can simply plug and play. And then for card payments, we try to get as much data as possible from your ERP or CRM systems so that we can send this data, basically it's called level 3 data, to the processors so that you have better rates, interchange rates. And we also do payment routing based on a set of criteria set by the travel merchant in order to improve the acceptance rates. And also, since payment orchestration deals with all of your existing payment infrastructure, so we try to receive all those files and bundle them into single dashboard so that at any given point of time, you have a snapshot of all the payment transactions that is conducted by your business.
Okay.
So in short, that's what we do.
We'll come back to the process later on in the session. And maybe for those people that are not well known with Hanair, it's quite an exceptional company, right? Maybe you can just in a couple of words, what's Hanair?
Yes, of course. Hanair is a very unique business model, and they are leader in travel distribution. So they serve more than 300 airlines and 100,000 travel agencies. So it's a very unique niche solution to solve the distribution needs of airlines on one side, and and also the ticketing needs of travel agencies on the other side.
If I remember it correctly, it's completely based on interlining, right? You extend the journey basically with Hanair as a facilitator. Okay, thank you, Suby, for that. Let's continue. So let's try to ring fence it a little bit, because the travel industry is obviously a global and massive. For this particular session, we're looking at, actually for the series, mainly at online travel. And online travel by itself is already very large, with according to global data, a market size in last year of $2.3 trillion, and expected at that time to be 4.6 in 2030, and maybe it's even more than that. So it's massive, it's global, it's cross-border, it touches on a lot of things, on technology, on finance, on risk. It consists of multiple business models, B2C, direct selling, B2B, indirect selling, but also combinations where you have a business selling to a business, or consumer selling to a business, to, well, combinations with bad banks and that kind of things, and consolidators in the middle. So it's a very complicated landscape, and it touches on very many different suppliers and services, like flights, hotels, experience, and transportation. And I think if we look at the market overall, and it's the consensus, I think that travel is back since the pandemic. It's exceeding 2019 levels, definitely on the leisure side, and business travel is getting close as well. The travel industry is fully back, and is also now focusing again on positive things, and on how to further optimize their offering, how to further expand it, instead of keeping the motor running and staying alive during the pandemic. So positive times now. And by the way, we'll see that payments overall play an important role at any given moment, if it's the payment, the refund, but also in good times and in bad times. But let's focus on the good times for now. Oh, this goes too fast. Here we go. I presented this yesterday as well in Brussels at an ECTA event. This is a tube map, as I call it, inspired, by the way, by the London tube map. In the middle, you see the circle line, the yellow line, if you know that one. And the idea is here that it shows in the different lines all the different components of the travel landscape. And obviously, there are all kinds of suppliers involved, from airlines, hotels, transportations, mobility, etc. There is very specific requirements around hospitality, around business travel, around the technology, at the core, the global distribution systems and the passenger service solutions. There's a lot of technology involved. There are different channels involved, different touch points involved. It's overall a very complicated landscape, which also is kept together by, for instance, by payment orchestration. You see here that there are B2C payments and B2B payments, consumers paying directly to suppliers, or the travel intermediaries accepting payment and then paying the suppliers in the second step. And in both cases, for instance, orchestration plays a role. We'll come to that later as well. There's obviously an eye for innovation, for new technology like blockchain, but also like Web 3.0, metaverse. There's many aspects that play a role, and it's trying to summarize that in one view. It's a lot of detail, I do realize that, but there's also a lot of dependency, and I think it's key for people that are active in this space to at least get a proper understanding of the bigger picture, the framework, and how all the dots connect. And this is a bit of a creative attempt to visualize that. If you then keep in mind all those channels, all those touch points, you can basically, if you look at travel payments, multiply them by a lot of factors, and that play a role in the end-to-end success of a payment, and also how on the merchant side, an airline, a hotel, an online travel agency, for instance, a tour operator, how they operate, what kind of systems, security, hygiene factors, if you like, they have to have in place. And I think it's fair to say that, for instance, airlines or online travel, they spend a lot of time on keeping the system secure, keeping the processes in place, keeping everything compliant. If it's any money laundering, if it's fraud, if it's credit risk, before they actually can start accepting a payment. All of these aspects come together and have to be considered to make it a robust end-to-end secure setup for a merchant to work with multiple partners, with systems, etc., and to have all the processes in place. Regulations, for instance, again, I was at ECTA conference in Brussels yesterday. Regulators were there. There's a lot of things happening. If it's PC3, if it's the package directive for tool operators, there's a lot of things to consider that makes this landscape again quite complex. Over this and the next 7 sessions, we'll touch pretty much on all these aspects, both on the hospitality side, the B2C, B2B, but also on fraud, on currency exchange, on regulations. Everything will come by. Okay, a different view here, and so Maarten, I'm going to pull you in here. Having worked for an airline 30 years, and what I'm trying to do here is basically look at the main. If you summarize what we just seen of in this word cloud, all these factors that play a role. What are the key ones? If you bundle them together, what are the key characteristics? And I think from an airline perspective, and you see the airline is a green one. You pretty much everywhere, you accept cards. You have multiple channels. You have a high transaction value. Definitely there's fraud to be dealt with. Credit risk always plays a big role. APMs, for instance, and I know that's your background, and we'll come to a bit more detail later on. But if you work on the airline side, I mean, how do you balance all of this? Can you say something about it?
Yeah, it's of course what you see here is, I think it's about 8 characteristics which are kind of scored. Of course, there are there are more. However, if I look indeed at the green, points, and it's interesting to see, because we've always considered an airline having a high ATV. However, it's of course, if you compare that to a tour operator or to a cruise company, that's even lower. You see the green line for airlines, for cards, moving all the way out. I would say, it's a matter of definition. I would say that all carriers selling online are obviously using and accepting cards. If I look at APMs, especially if you are a large airline with a broad global footprint, and you offer, you're selling in multiple countries, then the number of APMs will also be considerably higher. Costs, especially for an airline, are always top of mind. There are a few things what an airline can influence and always operate on thin margins, and that's why costs are always top of mind, because that's one of the few things an airline can influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that obviously there's two sides to the equation, the two perspectives, and the airline or the merchant looks at the one side, and for instance, for an acquirer or for a payment service provider, they also have to understand that it's not a one size fits all, right? The sub verticals, the subsectors within the travel industry can be quite different when it comes to some of these elements here. For instance, the average transaction value, or how much cross border is involved, or especially also credit risk. And I remember some cases with cruise lines, for instance, where the average time between the booking and the departure of the ship was like 9 months, and they do typically take an initial payment and a remainder payment, by the way, like tour operators do, but the business models differ quite a bit. And also, for instance, for an online travel agency that sells flights, the window where they can accept a payment and then have to pay the supplier, the airlines, either through the IATA clearinghouse or through making use of a virtual card, for instance, the dynamics are quite different. And I think that's very important to consider, that you can't just give them the same color. They are quite different. That's, I think, the main message here. I already mentioned that payments are quite a local experience, right? And Maarten, we have presented jointly this slide before, and I know that you, with your background, keep a close eye on the developments and how payments can be leveraged, to increase conversion or to reduce costs. But what's your view on the consumer payment trends in online travel, if you look at this?
Yeah, what I always said, I think that's one of my golden sayings. Payment is culture. Just like the culture differs in any part of the world or in every country, this is to a large extent also being reflected how people pay, how people prefer to pay. It's often a matter of habit, and what are you used to. For instance, in Holland and Germany, we're very much used to pay directly from our bank account, which you now have account-to-account payments. Many countries have cards. The obvious ones are the UK and Americas. Furthermore, you see in Asia, it's a lot with QR codes. Africa is quite big on payments by telephone. But what is important if you are a merchant, again, if it's an airline or an OTA, or that you tap into the local payment preferences of the country, because APMs, apart from let's say giving you a cost advantage as a merchant, can significantly grow your conversion as well. Mind you that in some countries it's credit cards which are more the alternative in respect to usage. I think in one of the next sessions we will dive deeper into APMs in general. I think the thing what I can say now is if you have a strategy about implementing APMs, it's not about how many APMs you should offer globally or on your websites, but the APM should be relevant. for you, both from a merchant perspective as well as for your customer. Obviously, look at costs. Take into account that the APMs, which probably you like from a risk perspective or from a cost perspective, doesn't mean that the client is on the same side. It could well be that the payment options which are preferred by a client may not be preferred by you as a merchant. So you have to find the right balance there. And what I would like to say as well, if you are working with a payment orchestration player or with a payment service provider, make use of their knowledge of the various payment options, because they come often with a lot of conditions. Think in this respect also about amount, or if you are able to refund it in the same way. Make use of their knowledge.
Mm-hmm. No, all very true. And I think also you have to onboard in the end, either through your partner or directly with these providers. And I think Suby, there's a technical integration upfront, but there's also, we'll come to orchestration later on, I know, but there's also obviously the onboarding and also the reconciliation that plays a role. But it's not simple to by yourself to unlock all these opportunities, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm just randomly thinking at the moment, if you would like to draw the same map, let's say 6 years ago from now, it will be not more than 5 payment methods, basically. So this explosion of all these payment methods and fintechs in the last years, in one way, as you said, it's all because of the localization. And that means now you have more complexity. That is the reason why the payment orchestration market itself evolved in the last few years. It's just to cut this complexity and to streamline all these payment methods, to strike the balance, because yes, you have a lot of payment methods, but at any given point, you can only show 3 or 4 choices in a particular country. Otherwise, it will affect your conversion rate. So that's what I think the orchestration adds value, to select those based on the data and based on the rules. And also, as you said, to align, giving the options is only one part of the solution, but the another part is reconciling all these data and aligning them with your existing business processes, because that's even a bigger challenge. As you said, reconciliation and
I like the word existing, because especially for airlines, and Maarten, I think you can concur, but the BAU, business as usual, is key, right? And do not disrupt the back office, do not introduce new processes, and keep it as much as possible on existing rails. And by the way, that's also the reason at the bottom you see the global card schemes, that they are still very dominant. Not every single country, but around the world. I think they still take the lion's share of the transactions. Also because they are, looking back at the Tube map, they work in all the possible scenarios, right? If it's the Tube in London, or if it's on the phone, or if it's on your mobile, if it's a point of sale, they have this existing network which is very robust and very effective, which is hard to copy if you start from scratch with, for instance, to come up with open banking on a global scale. By the way, you see also Revolut mentioned here. We'll come back to that later in the news section on their latest product. Moving on, I just want to not go over the bottom too much, over the different forms of payment. You've seen them on the world map already. You've seen also the global cards schemes have been active in this space since the 50s, 60s of the last century. So they've always been around. They've been, I think, key in developing cross-border travel by making payments travel from across borders. From the airline industry, if you look at the airline payment evolution from around 2000 to, well, today, and also for the next couple of years, you see that it's partly also driven by, at the top end, you see more the changes in how, for instance, flights were sold, how tickets were sold, from the more traditional, let's say, pre-e-commerce days, where the travel agencies played a very important role in the sales offices of the airlines, to the direct online channel, the airline.com, the rise of, maybe a bit earlier even, of online travel agencies, but also the rise of like mobile apps and the mobile websites of the airlines. And now you see also, if it's the meta searches like Google Flights, but also, for instance, what's next there? How will airlines sell their tickets? as a retailer, maybe as and becoming a marketplace themselves and combining it with all kind of other services and experience. So how payments are accepted and which forms of payments are relevant is also to a large extent depending on how the airlines are promoting their services and selling their tickets. Obviously, there are all kind of other elements that have played a role, and we see that in these sessions as well. What's next is the big question. So if you look at the bottom half, obviously you see the rise of, for instance, mobile wallets, of more and more local cards as well, but also alternative forms of payments based on account to account, for instance, on bank rails. Over the last couple of years, and we've seen the rise of buy now, pay later, for instance. We see also open banking becoming more and more relevant. We have seen some instances of, hey, if it's crypto or maybe in the future central bank digital currencies, and maybe also neobanks or super apps like Revolut or others that will play a role there as well. One thing for sure, and that's basically confirming what Suby just said. If you want to unlock all this potential, you really have to keep a close eye on, hey, how we're going to get this all sorted out by orchestration at the front end, but definitely also by reconciliation at the back end. Because if you have a shiny front end, but it's not being serviced at the back end, then it will still come to a grinding halt in the middle, and you don't want that. So that combination will be key moving forward.
Sorry, Paul, so just to add on that, I can't, especially for an airline, I can't, and I think you said it already and Suby said it already, but I can't stress it enough. It's so important that if you do your choice of your providers to take those requirements from your colleagues of accounting and reconciliation department very well into account. Often, it's forgotten, or it's considered difficult, or we have to take them into account as well. But it's part of it's a large part of the success. If you can't reconcile it, or you leave departments with a big problem, then it's the overall outcome is bad. So make sure you ask their requirements. See if your payment orchestration player can play a role in the middle by adding or streamlining all reconciliation data in such a way that your colleagues in reconciliation and accounting can actually work with it. It's really important.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I'm making a mental note now that I think organizing payments on the merchant side is definitely a topic that we can touch on in one of the later sessions, because I think that's really key, doing it right first time.
Right.
Okay. Arriving at payment orchestration, I think it's good to, first of all, maybe talk about what's the definition of payment orchestration, because there's not a single definition, I always say. For me, it's around this middleware that will absorb all the complexities both upstream and downstream, but also is agnostic, independent in basically executing the business rules set by the user, by the merchant, by the airline, by the OTA, and making sure that the routing or which value-added services are invoked are according to the policies and the strategy of the airline. So independent of acquirers, independent of downstream payment service providers, and making sure that you're this flexible middleware. That's for me payment orchestration. And again, at the bottom back office reconciliation, very key that you go full circle 360 and make sure that whatever happens to the front end is also posted to the financial systems, is reconciled. There's no leakage, there's no breakage. Everything is working according to plan. And Suby, you've been working on the platform for quite some time now.
Yes.
Anything to add here from your perspective?
Yes, as you said, we can always define multiple definitions, but for me, payment orchestration layer basically sits on top of your existing payment infrastructure, and so that you can manage all these complexities that we have seen so far in this presentation, and also monitor the performance of various payment processes and have an ability to fine-tune them to meet your strategic objectives. And what will be your strategic objectives? As I discussed before, probably it's just to increase your acceptance rate, to decrease your risk, and to decrease your overall payment cost. So payment orchestration provider should be able to provide you all the necessary tools to monitor and manage, and you have an ability to fine tune. And also not just for B2C payments, because in the travel industry, B2B payments are equally important because there are many layers here. So, and then again, we can go to technicalities. When we talk about from the technical side, yes, you need to have a rules engine where you need to set the rules, and you need to route the transactions based on bin range or some country or other criteria. And you can instantly able to integrate with any of your choice, as you said, agnostic to any PSP. And at the same time, very important is to reconcile all these payment files. That's why we exist, to cut that complexity, not to add more complexity, to cut that complexity. And that's what for me is payment orchestration layer.
Okay. Before maybe Maarten, your housekeeping again, because I was just keeping an eye on the Q&A here. Yes, the session is recorded and it will be made available after this event. I think Suby, the team will send an email, right, with the link to the recording.
Yes.
Yeah, and Paul, while you're on the Q&A, there's an interesting question, and I think that goes back to what we lengthily discussed about 2 weeks ago at the Payment Leadership Summit in Athens. So one of the questions is, how soon do you think airline indirect channels will be ready to support all those new payment methods, which was on the previous slide? I think if I recall well, one of the future sessions will be on indirect or NDC. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's a good question, and again, it came being at a Association of European Travel Agencies yesterday. That obviously came up as well. The disconnect between the speed in which the B2C innovation is going and B2B is following a bit slower, say it very nicely. It has to do with the complexity, the sheer size of the industry, and it needs to be very, very robust. And any change to that global distribution system and IATA BSPs, that takes years. The smallest change take years, so it's not very easy, not very agile, not very easy to change. So for the time being, we'll have this two-step process where the travel agency, travel media at the front end will be the flexible layer, and then it has to then harmonize in such a way that the back end, the supplier, in this case the airline, is able to, and the systems in the middle are able to deal with it. And that's where, for instance, the merchant model that the travel agencies use, so that they are the merchant of record, they take the payments, and then in the background distribute the funds, to the individual suppliers by typically over existing rails, and very, very slowly, new forms of payments are added. But yeah, there's definitely out of sync, say it like that. Correct.
Yeah, and I think what came to mind also 2 weeks ago, and I think we as airlines as well as IATA have to be a bit fair and look at ourselves as well. I mean, NDC was typically run by people in distribution, and not necessarily with a sharp focus on payments, which I can understand, because payments is just one of the components which comes to that. So, but in the end, it's an important component. So I think the payment experts may have come a bit late to the table, but they're there now. And it will go, but it will take some time. Correct.
Yeah, catching up. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, Maarten, and so we're going to move on. A bit more travel fintech trends. First of all, what's travel fintech? Typically, it's either a travel merchant or a travel technology provider that extends or expands into financial, if it's payments or other financial services, and bundles that, or even does a spin-off, like Amadeus has done with Outpace, for instance, or Sabre. And there are a couple of main trends in there, and I won't go through all of them. Again, this picture is available in the public domain, but also the recording will be made available. But on the B2C side, we already touched on alternate payment methods, APMs, central bank digital currencies. On the B2B side, B2B payments, embedded 360 payments, where the travel agency takes the pay-in to fund the payout, for instance, virtual cards to pay the suppliers, orchestration both on the B2C and on the B2B side, but also, for instance, split payments, and then on the more like, let's say, next-gen fintech, price freeze or insurance subscriptions, kind of more, hey, how can we increase conversion by giving more confidence to the customer that, if their trip plans change, that they can, can make an easy change or they get the money back, that kind of thing. So many things going on. Again, we'll have more sessions to come that will touch on some of these individual topics. But there's definitely a lot of things going on, and it's good to keep an eye on it. So maybe after all these topics, a bit of what's some recent news. I handpicked two publications basically. On the right hand side, you see that Fintech's News Singapore recently had a topic on how Fintech is reinventing travel payments. So the point here is that it's becoming more and more mainstream. Payments in travel, and you see also that the vendor landscape is expanding, and gets more fragmented as well. So there's a lot of colorful logos here on this one, for instance, on B2B payments. So there's definitely a lot of attraction in that side. On the other side, you see Aer Lingus from Ireland, Dublin, first airline globally to offer one-click checkout with Revolut Pay. And I just used this example, and I'll go to the next one, to do a bit of a deep dive into a product, just for your information. And why have I picked Revolut Pay? Because I think it's an interesting example of trying to find a balance between, and Maarten, you already touched on this, by the way, trying to find a balance between the customer perspective and also the merchant perspective. What's in it for the customer? And like you said, Maarten, in a lot of cases, it's skewed towards one side, right? It's either very good for the merchant, for instance, open banking, because the money enters your account basically the same day. There's no fraud, there's no credit risk, it's relatively cheap. And on the other side, for a customer to abandon their credit card, for instance, and to move to the use of open banking without any form of incentive, right? No credit, no incentive, no perks, no insurance, etc. That's quite a steep dive, right? I mean, you lose a lot there. And on the other side, for instance, with high-end credit cards, there's a lot of value on the consumer side, but basically the burden is on the merchant to absorb the costs that come with that, right? That pay for that value. Yeah. And I think what I find interesting in this particular use case is that well, it is account to account, so it is on the bank rails. Although you start your checkout journey, with your card details, the system will pick up, hey, this is actually in this case a Revolut issued account. We can take it off the card rails and can move it further down the account to account rails. But it does come with a very strong consumer brand, by the way. There's a lot of people using it already. Some 35 million active account managers. It's used all over Europe already. And it combines, it tries to find this sweet spot between both sides, and there is there's value, so there's also cost, but what's this sweet spot where the additional sales it generates, how much are you willing to pay for that, basically? And Maarten, you've dealt with this topic for many years, right? So trying to judge, do we want to enter China and actually pay a premium because we really are very keen to move into that market, or is it going to cannibalize an existing idea in the Netherlands, for instance, where we already have a good product and it's replaced by something that we're not very keen on, right? How do you see, for instance, this product, Maarten?
Yeah, but that's absolutely it. I mean, does it? I always say, do your homework before you implement a new payment option, and make sure you understand who your customers are. Look at the demographics of your customer. I mean, the type of merchant, the type of airline you are will also define what type of customers you have. I can recall that we were offering a cash payment option, and that didn't work out. It didn't fly. But then we deep dived a bit more into the customer demographics, and we noticed that makes sense. So do your homework, but also if you are implementing a payment option, make sure you do some analysis after that as well. Do you see an uptake? And like Paul was saying, is it cannibalizing another payment option? Is it increasing your conversion? Do you get more sales even? I mean, probably the best price what you could get in that is if a new aircraft, a bigger aircraft will be in place, but that will not happen so much. But it's absolutely right. You have to look at the demographics, and then look what does it bring to the table. Like Paul was saying, in China, you have to tap into the usual suspects there, but there are other countries where you could offer a payment option where it's nice, but it could cannibalize your preferred payment option. And like Paul is saying, this one, Revolut, could be a very nice spot in the middle, because it comes with perks for the customer, but it also shows a lower fee for you as a merchant.
Okay, yeah, that's all very true. And we'll do a deep dive in the next session. I think we'll also look into, for instance, buy now, pay later, and some of the other wallets, and open banking as well. And again, there are very many very valid use cases for open banking, and it's also very much, like you said, a cultural thing, right? In the DACH region, in the Nordics, in the Benelux, it's very well established. But in other markets, it's struggling because it basically has to replace the incumbent, and that's typically a card. And then, yeah, you're up against the card. And then you have to also do this kind of like-for-like comparison and look at, for instance, like I've done here, what are the acceptance criteria? What are the adoption factors? And does it really add up?
Yeah, and as a merchant, and again, I use the example of an airline, try to be commercial, or ask your marketing department to help you out if you are responsible for payments. Like if you have to convince a customer who's used to pay by card and he gets its perks, then make sure you give him, let's say, a bonus as well. There are a lot of goodies an airline could play with, which doesn't cost you a lot of money. So try to do that in a campaign setup, and that will drive conversion of the for you preferred payment option as well.
Yep. I'm just checking we have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, I noticed there are one or two questions about, let's say, NDC and new order. It's a good question, but also quite detailed, and do not know if you want to.
Yeah, I see Paul. Paul Byrne, thanks for the question. Hope you're well. Settlement with orders is IATA's new method of payment settlement through a clearinghouse like BSP. Will there ever be bilateral settlement between sellers and airlines?
It's the case already, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it does. Yeah, in low cost, for instance, that are not on the BSP, that is very common. In a way, it's same a bit with Paul with NDC. It's be careful what you wish for, because you have a one-to-many, many-to-one setup, which is very effective. It's been for the last 50 years, has very robust, and has like billions of volume going through it. Maybe for the top 10% that brings in 80% of the volume, bilateral agreements and bilateral settlement might make sense, but it's definitely the long tail that's going to be very difficult. 20% of the volume that's triggered by 80% of the agencies, where you would have to, like with NDC, have to maintain these relationships and do all the reconciliation. I mean, the hotel industry would die pretty much for a clearinghouse like IATA, BSP, and ARC to place. They don't have it, so they do it, and it's even messier than the airline payments world. So maybe that's something to think about. And Otto de Vries, all the way from South Africa, considering the number of new players in the travel fintech space, consolidation will need to happen. But do you see an opportunity for payment solution providers to specialize, e.g., non-airline only or airline specific, versus BSP ARC? Maarten?
Sorry, I would typically, answering the question, I would definitely see that, and that's already happening by means of aggregators as well. Either the usual suspects which are moving towards the aggregator space, or new fintech companies who form that role and are placing themselves in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Finom is a good example of a company born
Yeah, I
out
mean,
of the airline industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can also see many other use cases. Just today, I read an article where payment service provider is only concentrating on construction industry, for example. So they are tackling now into many verticals to specialize in those verticals and to solve those relevant problems. Because payments are very different between one industry to another. So,
and even when, like I said in the introduction, even within the travel industry, there's major differences. So
yes.
I think we've done quite well timing-wise. I mean, we're at the end of the session. We have 1 minute left. Just like to thank Suby for sponsoring and Maarten for joining. And hopefully you'll be back soon, Maarten, for the next session as well. And to give you a heads up on the next episode, where we'll do a bit more deeper dive into card payments. But also into payment product strategy and into the individual forms of payment. That's the agenda for now. It might change a little bit depending on what kind of content we can bring together and the guest speakers that we'll have. But there's definitely much more to talk about. So looking forward to the next session in about a month from now. Again, we'll follow in an email, and also online you'll see the announcements. And looking forward to the next sessions. Thank you very much for attending, and let us know your feedback, because we definitely like to make this a community event where we'll have a lively discussion about all topics that play a role here. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Thanks all for your attention, and thanks for
all.
being present. Bye-bye. Have a good remainder of the